Hey, what's up? I just got off of a Skype call with Andrew Horn. He's awesome. So Andrew is a Brooklyn-based entrepreneur, badass who is doing some really incredible things. There aren't really many people that I know right now that are building billion-dollar businesses. And I think that I'm really excited about this call because we move through a storyline that is just incredible. But there's so much to take away in terms of how to find purpose and fulfillment in life, where to get started in a first business or perhaps in a nonprofit, which was Andrew's first business. And then we dive into like really, more complex business concepts like, finding a technical co-founder or raising, venture capital. And I think the beauty is that throughout the conversation, we transition from very uncertain and unclear to a sense of fulfillment and purpose while thinking about service, while thinking about making an actual difference. And what we find is that like you can build $1 billion business in service, in trying to create a better world and a better experience for everyone else. Very, very profound lesson. And so it's, my privilege to kind of let you hear this conversation. So without further ado, here is Andrew Horn. Boom. There we go.
Game time.
It is game time. How are you?
Good, man. What's good in your world?
Honestly, most things, all things. I am of the mindset that it's always a perspective choice. So even the stuff that's like difficult or trying, like
Sure.
I'm loving it right now. So I think all things really are good. How about for you?
Dude, I'm taking time for the right stuff right now. I just had a great talk last night on.
Tell me a little bit about it. You seemed excited when I emailed you yesterday.
Yeah, I've been kind of building this body of work for the past like 6 months that's all about what I'm calling kind of the art of connection, which
Cool.
is kind of like this sequential process of kind of like conquering social anxiety and shyness. Simple techniques to just be yourself in social situations, and then how to actually kind of package your ideas and business in ways that people get it and want to work with you. So it's just kind of like authentic communication at every level, and then how to actually kind of make people want to work with you. So last night was like really a talk that focused more on kind of the shyness aspect of something that is like something I dealt with personally for a very long time, and like it's still very much like a part of who I am. But like no one ever talks about social anxiety,
Yeah.
and we all like live with this like healthy dose of discomfort and kind of like an overly critical internal dialogue, and just put up with it because we think that it's normal. And so my whole kind of objective was like, how do you give people different thoughts and ideas and techniques so that rather than thinking about all this stuff that just gets in the way from them showing up in the world the way they want, to them just being able to identify how they'd like to be, what they want to talk about, questions that they can ask to like foster more interesting conversations. And it was really good, man. It's nice to be able to share something that's like so deeply personal and
Yeah.
that, I wish that I knew.
So, I guess one, who was the audience for it last night, and then two, where do you see the audience growing? Is this like future TED Talk? Is this, um, where do you see this kind of message being shared? And in part because I want to help share it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, I mean the focus is absolutely tribute right now.
Right.
I think that the goal is truly to turn tribute into $1 billion business and really be the hallmark for the digital age, or Snapchat of kind of like meaningful video messages. So that's definitely the focus. But I think that just like my personal writing is kind of falling under this umbrella. And so, I'm sure that there is a TED Talk in here somewhere. And then, down the road, I think once we've really got tribute to a point where we've got kind of like um, executive and operators like really in place, that I'll be able to dig in more. But yeah, I'm sure that at some point, I think that the simplest analogy would be that it's how to win friends and influence people for the technical generation and or the digital generation.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool. So beautiful segue. We are live, sir. We're rolling. And I thought that that was, better than any kind of intro we could have. I think it gave a sense of who you are, what you care about, and how your brain is working, and that's really exciting because
totally.
your brain is interesting, and I'm honored to be able to have this kind of conversation with you. So, um, I want this to not feel, as I now pull us and show the cameras, right? I want this to not feel like an interview so much as a conversation. We've had tremendous conversations in the past, and just hoping to do it again. Um, but ideally, there's some sort of flow, story arc, your past to
Of course.
present to what you're hoping to see in the future. And all the while, I'm just kind of like, I'm gonna push back on things that sound maybe too perfect or like too easy, and say like,
Please
what
do.
was that actually like? How did you make that leap? But it'll come as it comes. Love your bulldog coffee cup. Uh, awesome. Or tea. I guess you're doing tea out of it.
I think it's actually a cow.
It's a cow.
Yeah,
Okay.
a man
Um,
with tea.
but yeah, so I mean, if you could, this segue, so you're talking about how to win friends and influence people in like the digital age, right? What was a young Andrew Horn like? It seems now that you might have been some version of introverted, um, and I'm interested to see how you think back on your like childhood or your formative years.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest shift happened when I moved from Hawaii to Virginia. And I think that when I was growing up in Hawaii from age 0 to 13, so I basically moved for high school, I was very introverted, very shy. I did not have very many friends. I had like a great difficulty talking to women, which is something I was very interested in doing, but
Mm-hmm.
incapable of.
Mm.
And I remember that when I moved to Virginia, I had this very poignant experience where I tried out for freshman football. I think pretty much everybody makes the team, but I made some friends and we went to this kind of community center mall type thing called Reston Town Center. And it was where all like the young high school kids would go and you just like walk around and you like flirt with girls. And that's like what you do on Friday and Saturday. And I was with this group of guys and they were kind of like eyeing this group of girls and they were kind of looking at each other and just like playing that like dance. And like all the guys were talking about going to talk to these girls, but they were scared and like no one was doing it. And I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, like, this is just something that I don't do. And in that moment, I also realized that these people don't know who I am. I know one thing for certain, and that is that I was very unhappy in Hawaii. I was
Right.
unhappy. I was unhappy with who I was. I was unhappy with like my inability to talk to people. So I just realized that if I wasn't happy, I just needed to change something, and I just needed to do something different. And so I just walked up to these girls in front of like all these guys, and I just started talking to them. And in that moment, like they were receptive, and like I was uncomfortable, but the guys like came back and they like appreciated me for it. And so, in many ways, I was able to talk to these girls, which I wanted to do, and I also received this validation from these guys of whom I was very much seeking this validation.
Yeah.
So in that way, for a while, I very much kind of like defined myself by that, my ability to be a flirt and to go and talk to girls because other people would like that.
Yeah.
And then, like for a great deal, especially in high school, I think I was a term that I learned recently is what they call like a shy extrovert, which is someone who's very actualized socially, but is on the inside dealing with that kind of like internal like self critic and just kind of like self doubt, doubting one's values to others. And so, I was like, adept with women and like had girlfriends and I ended up kind of like having good friends. I really kind of like left my studies behind in pursuit of fun and friendship,
Mm.
and a lot of kind of like exciting, like very fleeting stuff like partying. And so that kind of like carried over going into college. I, didn't have very good grades coming out of high school, but went to a not so great school my freshman year, got a really good GPA because I knew that I wanted to go to a good college, was
Hmm.
able to transfer out after a year. And still there, I think that what was most important to me was having fun and friendship. And it was like those two F's, if you will. And I never said that before, but I was having fun, but I certainly wasn't fulfilled. And I still found myself, seeking a great deal of that validation of, I think, like really not being comfortable enough in myself to kind of like go in and ask myself what I wanted, what was important, what was fulfilling. Um, I was just so enthralled by like the feeling of being liked by so many people, and so that was kind of something that I pursued for a long time. And then I think that there were some very important conversations I had right around the time that I was getting ready to graduate that gave me the right platform to start asking myself the right questions
Yeah.
about who I was, what I wanted, and that really kind of like lifted the veil, if you will, or lifted the curtain, and then really set me on my path.
Awesome. So let's hit that in 1 second. So I just want to draw attention to now the three F's, which sounds really interesting: fun, friendship, and then fulfillment. Um, and I think that you said something that really spoke to me, which is this like shy extrovert. I feel like I really align with how you describe that, and that's a new thing. So I want to personally take some time and like dive into what that might mean. Um, how is that? How has that realization today changed things for you from the 13-year-old who like realizes that he can go and actually act and say hi to girls, but it may or may not have ended with fulfillment, right? Which I think is probably the most important of the three F's. How is that showing up today differently? This sense of awareness that like yes, we need to in some way be the life of the party, but it may or may not end in fulfillment.
Yeah, totally. I think that when we are ourselves, we are very aware of it, and when we are not ourselves, we are also very aware of it.
Mm.
And the simplest construct that I've learned and how I'm really aware of how I'm showing up in the world is this idea of internal versus external motivation. Is I have a great friend named Jonathan Swerdlin who literally lives across the hall from me here, and he's just we all have a lot of us have those friends that are just kind of like unabashedly themselves,
Mm.
and they're just like weird and they're just funny, but you can tell that there's just no delay from them like thinking something and then just doing it, and they're just comfortable in their own skin is like the simple way to say it. And I remember one time I asked him, like, where do you draw your confidence? And he just said, it's just internal motivation. He just said, like, anytime I do something, it's because I want to do it, not because I want to achieve some sort of perception from anyone.
That's awesome.
And so that idea of internal motivation, like, am I saying this? Am I doing this? Am I looking there because I want to do it or because it feels good to me? Or because I think someone else will think it looks cool or sounds smart. And it's a really powerful dichotomy because, like, if we're seeking external validation, you know, we'll never really know. You just exist in this place of the unknown of wondering if what you say is going to be validated and reciprocated. And a lot of times you don't know if they think it's smart. You don't know if you look cool. And so you're just going to have anxiety all the
Yeah.
time. But, if you actually take the time to identify, how you want to be in situations, I want to look people in the eyes. I want to listen. I want to be animated. I want to be myself. Um, then you can actually just like rely on that because that's truth. So
Yeah.
where the external stuff is all in the unknown, the internal, like that. Like I walked into my presentation last night and I was like, what are three things? How do I want to be here? It's like I want to be animated, I want to be myself, and I don't want to think about what people think about me.
Yeah.
And so it's like when I have those things about how I want to be, I can focus on those and just exist and be confident in that.
So powerful right there. That's awesome. Reminds me of two things. One, you spending time listening to or reading Brene Brown.
Mm.
So
Yep.
Brene Brown is like new in my world. She's come up 1,000 times over the
Yeah.
years, but like finally now listening. And she talks about the power that you have when you're internally motivated versus externally motivated, specifically in a conversation on the Tim Ferriss podcast where
Mm.
they're talking about tech founders and people that are looking to do big things. Uh, and I just think that there's a ton there to really unpack where she's like, we could list a name of people and you tell me if they're internally motivated or externally motivated, and it's like becomes really transparent, it seems, when someone is doing the work that they feel they're meant to be doing versus doing the work because of X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
opportunities that seem to be
Totally.
apparent. So we'll go back into your story because I'm excited to hear what happens on the way out of college. So you
Well,
said you
do you know why? I mean, while you're on Brene Brown, do you know the work? You should just drop that on people.
absolutely, yes. So my girl, Byron Katie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
that's Byron Katie, not Brene Brown.
yeah.
Sorry,
So
I mixed
Byron
I mixed
Katie
up.
is the work. Brene Brown spends a lot of time on shame.
Yeah.
Like that's her word. And I think maybe not bold, but her work is all focused on uh, the feelings surrounding shame and like worth. And she is a boss, badass, great communicator who isn't using sample size one like studies. She's doing empirical research and backs up every claim she makes is founded on science, not she makes a claim and then tries and prove it via science. And I'm into that. I don't operate in that way, um, but I love that she does. And so Brene Brown will link out to her for sure. But Byron Katie and the work is also very important. I think there's a chance that we talk about her in future in this story.
Yeah. Um, so there was my mom is a writer and a speaker, um, and she was invited to a conference called Renaissance Weekend my junior year of college. And so Renaissance Weekend is this really beautiful conference that brings together smart people from a bunch of different disciplines, artists, actors, entertainers, scientists, Nobel Prize winners, like titans of business. And basically, what they do is they take the collective intelligence of everyone who's coming, and there's no agenda every year for the conference. So what they do is they build panels based off the collective intelligence and expertise of whoever's coming that year. So if they have, an astronaut and like the director of NASA coming that year, they're going to do a panel on the future of NASA. If they have three presidential speechwriters, they'll do a speech on like the greatest presidential speeches ever. It's just, full gambit. And so my mom got invited that year, and she invited me. And I just remember feeling, that again, that thought of being invisible or like being seen and just like not being valued was so present just because there were so many smart people there, and there I was, and I was a junior in college, and like I was partying 3 4 days a week and having fun, but like had no idea what I wanted to do. I wasn't cultivating any like significant skill that I was proud of, and so I just felt kind of like outmatched, and like I could exist in that space. I could talk to people, I could have fun conversations, but I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. And I remember like on one of the last days, this guy, Steve Robbins, basically stood up at one of the last panels, and the panel was called like Living a Life Lived. And basically these people were just talking about living a life of purpose. And everyone went, and none of the guidance really like resonated at all. It was all very kind of like boilerplate stuff that you've heard many, many times at that age. And then Stever just stood up, and he's got this like bright orange hair, and he had these kind of like Harry Potter glasses, and he just says, "Some of you will wake up tomorrow and you will ask yourselves, what did I do with the last 10 years of my life? And you'll either like your answer or you won't, and you'll have an opportunity to change course." And he said, "Some of you will wake up 10 years from now and ask yourself, do I like what I've done with the last 10 years of my life? And you'll either like your answer or you won't. You'll have an opportunity to change course." And he basically just says that, like, the idea of living a life of purpose is like a question that never goes away, and like we can either like tap into that now, or we can just like elude that question and not answer it directly, and we're going to have to answer it in 10 years. And it was the first time that someone broke it down to me this way, where I knew that I wasn't on any sort of like trajectory of passion and purpose. I just didn't have that. But he was the first person that really made it crystal clear that if I didn't figure that shit out at 21, I was going to figure it out at 31. Is that it was this thing that was just like vital to your existence as a person, to really be actualized. And so in that moment, I just remember there was no like guidance about here's what you do, here's how you find your passion, here's how you find your purpose. He just said like, you have to do it at some point. You know what I mean? It's like you can do it now and it's going to be much easier, or you can do it at 31. And it's probably going to be more difficult, and you're going to have kids and you're going to have debt and then like all this other stuff. And so I remember that we got to go and have dinner with him another night, and he just kind of like opened me up, and we got to have a conversation where he asked me what I was passionate about. And I remember my answers were partying, women, and money. And he was like, "Well, what do you need money for?" And I was like, "Traveling." And he's like, "Well, what do you like about traveling?" And I was like, "New experiences and fun." He's like, "Well, why don't you do that with your life?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he just was the first person to just ask me why and dig in and like kind of again like lift the veil about what I was telling myself was important to me. And then he was the person who gave me the construct of pleasure versus happiness, which is this idea that pleasure is the things that we do that bring us excitement, but that are ultimately fleeting. So, I had a lot of that in my life where the night could be fun, some romp with like a woman could be fun, but those feelings of excitement oftentimes are gone like immediately afterwards or the next day. Whereas fulfillment, or sorry, happiness are those things that we do that make us feel good long after the actual event is done. And so, what are the things that you do that you look back on fondly, days, weeks, and months after you've done them, and are really kind of like fulfilled by those things? And so, when I had this construct of pleasure versus happiness, again, I think it's a very simple way to like evaluate what you're doing and just ask yourself, like, is this pleasurable or is this truly making me happy? And I'm not putting, any sort of kind of like stamp on pleasure and saying that's bad. I think it has its place, but it's just a great way to evaluate the things that you do that are truly like filling your soul and kind of like giving you that sense of purpose. And when I answered that question, the reality is that I didn't have really anything. Is that I was having a great deal of fun, but I really didn't feel that I was fulfilled and didn't have a lot that I was truly happy with. And so that led me to kind of getting ready to graduate and looking at hospitality jobs and getting ready to go and work for some hotel chain, some building, doing something kind of in like front of office, like front house. And I just didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just remember thinking to myself like the same thing. It's like, what happens in 10 years? Like if everything goes right in 10 years, what am I doing? Running a hotel? Why do I want to do that? And I just didn't. And so rather than jump in, I just realized that I need to go and figure it out. I need to find out what it was that filled me up. And so my dad was moving to Alaska, and I had read Into the Wild, I think a year before that.
And
And
that's
so I Jonathan
epic. Yeah.
yeah,
So I
I Jonathan
bought a leather belt.
I super tramped it, and I did not really super tramp it. I
Yeah.
just told my dad, "Dad, cancel your plane ticket. Let's drive it." And so my dad and I ended up driving across the country from Virginia to Anchorage after for
Wild.
about a month. We were on the road, so no real route. We just kind of made it up as we went, and just started like actually kind of really spending that time to focus on like what I wanted to do and what it was that those things could be that I think I could be passionate about at that age.
That's awesome.
And ultimately, the I think that I didn't know this now, but the way that I talk about this now is my mom asked me a great question at Christmas last year, and she said, um, "What do you know to be true beyond a questionable doubt about your own experience on this earth?" And I thought it was really powerful. It's like, what do you know to be true? Like when I do X, I feel this way.
Yeah.
When other people do X, it's like, what's just a universal truth?
Yeah.
And I realized one, talking to my dad, we were we were talking about his military service, and when he was talking about it, he just had this great kind of like resonance and sense of pride with what he was doing. And I asked him about that, and he's an experimental test pilot and a really incredible guy. And he was like, "Yeah, I was very proud of that." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, I was doing something, in service of a cause that was greater than myself, and I was like very connected to, my team." And he asked me what the last thing I did, or what was the last thing that I've done that I was proud of, and not just like a single act, but like when's the last time that you were just like proud of the way you were living life?
Yeah.
And again, just like I had nothing. There was, I had these like moments of exertion that were something that I say I could be proud of, whether it was like working hard or like swimming, doing a marathon or something like that, but nothing that was truly indicative of like how I was living my life. And then I thought back to my junior year of college when I had an opportunity to volunteer with this organization that did adaptive athletics for young people with disabilities. And it was something that I got connected to because of a familiar relationship. And I went out and I volunteered in Chicago. And I enjoyed my experience there very much, but it wasn't transformative. It didn't really kind of like hit me in terms of, how important it was and how much of an impact it had on me. But when I look back, I just like thought about those 2 months, and I was proud of the work that I had done. I was, I had actually like gone out and taken the initiative to like flyer bomb half of downtown Chicago
Hmm.
and like, like raise like $10,000 for a charity event and actually like go out and like work late nights to like actually get events done. And I was proud of that.
Yeah.
And I just started to think about like that experience, and I realized that like, oh wow, like there's one thing that I've done that I'm proud of. And I just remember feeling how good it felt to work in service of other people. Like I was just helping people.
Yeah.
And that was kind of that first universal truth, was that I feel good when I'm helping people. And if I can do that, then I'll probably be happier than I am now. And so I just really held on to that. And
Yeah.
nonprofits became a very tangible way to actually do that. And, I also knew that I didn't enjoy working for people. So I was interested in entrepreneurship. So I knew that I had these two truths. And that was that number one, helping people made me feel good, filled me up. And number two is that I wanted to be my own boss. And so when I came back, I started working for this entrepreneur at an executive search firm, really as her executive assistant.
I'm going to
And
pause you
then,
real quick. I'm going to pause you real quick because I think that a lot has just happened in the story, and I think that I
mhm,
just want to try and highlight a couple of the things. So, um, college is wrapping up. Fulfillment is something that you're maybe searching for passively, but you get like a gut check by going to Renaissance weekend. And the gut check is that I've outkicked my coverage. I'm in a room full of people making an actual difference or doing really incredible things. And while, yes, you were able to talk with them, it gave you a sense of the depth that your life seemed to be lacking. And then you
mm,
found words for that difference in what you were feeling, which was good and pleasurable, but what you were looking for, which was a sense of happiness,
yeah,
right?
happiness and fulfillment.
Happiness, fulfillment. So, uh, two things about Renaissance Weekend is that we actually got connected through Steve Robbins, who
Yeah.
is incredible, and so we need to make sure that everyone knows that Steve not only has changed your perspective and set you off on this course, but he's done a ton for me as well, as a friend and mentor. Um, and so the things that stand out about the Stever portion of the speech and then you guys following up with dinner is, again, it seemed like another gut check where it's
Hmm.
like you can ask yourself these questions today
Hmm.
and start investigating your own truths, or you can postpone 10 years and the questions will rise again and you can choose to answer them in the future, or you can push them aside. But the questions will always come up. It's just a matter of whether or not you're going to take the time to unpack them.
Hmm.
That sounds fair and right.
Yeah, I
And
would
so
say so.
and so then you, unlike I'd say most people, decided to actually take some time and unpack those questions in this seemingly epic, maybe overly romanticized in my mind, road trip from Virginia to Anchorage, Alaska. I'm imagining it's like the coolest thing, but I'm sure it was like, the car started to smell and you and your dad were at each other's throats by Missouri. But that sounds really rather incredible.
Yeah, it's
And
just
and
go
so
ahead.
the process, it seems, you allow time and space to start asking questions and reflecting on things that have actually mattered to you at this point,
The
right?
internal journey.
The internal journey. Okay. Um, so you get to Alaska, and whether or not you had words for it, you found out what to that point has actually mattered to you, or given you a sense of actual happiness and fulfillment.
Hmm.
And boom, this is when Andrew Horn realizes that nonprofits and entrepreneurship are like the spaces that speak to you, because it's only when you've been acting in service of others that you've felt that fulfillment or
Hmm.
true happiness. How exciting. We're at the juicy part now. Now, please tell. So you get executive search firm, something like you said, an assistant. Tell us that story, please.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to connect with a woman named Edie Frazier. So Edie has been an executive search for, and she's still a very, very close friend and mentor. And she just actually did a really nice thing for me this week. So Edie started a company called Diversity Best Practices. So she was a woman who was very influential in the advancement of women in like high level Fortune 500 executive roles, starting like way back in the 70s. And so it started with women in executive roles, and then she was also very involved with like organizations like Emily's List and advancing women in high level government roles. Right around the time I connected with her, she was just publishing a book called Do Your Giving While You're Living,
Ooh.
very involved as a philanthropist. And so I had an opportunity to come and work at her search firm, really as kind of like an office manager, executive manager. So help her with everything that she was doing away from search, which I was more excited about and what
Hmm.
I wanted the access to. But then also I was working as an executive recruiter, which quite frankly, I was not good at, because I just, it'd be funny if Edie heard this, but I cared about Edie and all the things she was doing entrepreneurially, but I did not really care about the executive headhunting. It's a really tedious process, and you just have to really kind of like hit these databases and find people all day,
Hmm.
every day. And I just didn't have that kind of attention for things I didn't care about. So I was fun to have in the office, and I made 2 pots of coffee a day, and that's why I think people liked me. But I was not very good at my job. And so I remember that like when I was in DC, I started promoting in nightclubs to make a little bit of money, which was like a fun little entrepreneurial venture. I was volunteering at several of the shelters in the city and getting involved more as a volunteer. And I just remember that the next logical step to me was, you know what? Like I know that I want to do nonprofit stuff. I know that I want to be an entrepreneur. And I had this experience with Dreams for Kids in Chicago when I was a junior. So one day I just called up Tom Toohey, and I basically said, Tom Toohey is the founder of Dreams for Kids Chicago, the organization I volunteered with.
Uh-huh.
And I said, there are no large scale adaptive athletic providers in Washington, D.C., organizations that do sports for young people with disabilities. And I said, let's bring it to D.C. And really, without hesitation, he just said, go for it. And he's like, we don't have any money to support you or anything. He's like, you can leverage our 501(c)(3) status, but it's all on you because we don't have the time to help. And I was like, perfect. So in a way, and this is something I always tell to young people that want to start nonprofits, I really believe that, so many people want to start their own thing. Whereas I think one of the best things that I did early on is that I knew an organization that I believed in that could fill a void in DC. And so I kind of skipped the process of obtaining 501(c)(3) status, which can be expensive and time taking. And so I would immediately, I had no idea what I needed to do. And so I just Googled literally how to start a nonprofit. Like, and that's the thing for like anyone who starts the business is like if you just Google whatever the question is in your head and you tell yourself you don't know what you're doing, like literally you're gonna find like the first answer will just like lay out every single step. You know everything you need to do. That's the reality of the world we live in. So like if
Yeah.
you don't, you know what I mean? And so it just showed me every single step. I called someone on the phone in DC. They walked me through the process of starting a nonprofit. And so again, I did it in a weekend. I applied for, to incorporate in Washington, D.C. I got all our paperwork in order and I sent it off. And then I remember, I sometimes tell this story of I was in the office one day, the executive search firm, and for some reason I had it mailed to the office. I still don't know why I did that because it wasn't smart. And I'm sitting in there, and I get a package from FedEx, and it's a FedEx envelope. And I remember that it was very similar to the envelope that I got the week before that was a ticket from Washington, D.C. And so I was like, oh shit, like they got my ticket again, or like they got my plates again, like when I was speeding. And I open it up, and it was this like beautiful kind of like embossed paper. And it was like Dreams for Kids has been incorporated as a nonprofit in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And I like just kind of like started crying, and it was just like, holy shit! Like I know that like we haven't really yet done anything, but like this is my thing now, and it just like I just reaffirmed it. It was like it was like one very tangible step on the way, and our first event and like one of the most powerful events that we did at Dreams for Kids was something called adaptive water skiing, which is where you take kids with a range of physical, cognitive disabilities, and you give them an opportunity to go water skiing for the first time. And one of the really powerful things about this is that it takes a great deal of equipment and volunteers to pull off this event, because kids get on these basically outrigger skis. So if I'm the ski, basically there's like two outriggers on either side that balance the ski so you can go down the waves like this,
Cool.
and the kid's sitting in the ski, and you have two volunteers on either side as well. And so our first event, we started just kind of like hitting the pavement and raising enough money to kind of go out and do this first event, which I think was probably like 10, 12,000 bucks. And we went out in the middle of summer. We got like 50 kids out. Some of the stories from that night again of just like kids who have never done something like this before or dreamt that it was possible. You're taking kids from the inner city who, like, for some of them, they literally said it was the first time that they had seen like a real lake, and that was like, what? And so basically, what happens is like these kids come back, and it's once they see themselves doing these things that they dreamt like impossible,
Hmm.
they can never tell themselves that they can't do that. And it gives them kind of like a little bit of confidence to actually come back and do it again, or to go try a new sport, or to get their parents to take them out with other sports. It's like athletics are so vital to the development of not only kind of like social skills, but also, physical well being. And so we got these kids out, and I remember that like we pulled off this event, and we had 100 volunteers and 50 kids, and all this money, and all the food was donated. And when we had our volunteer dinner afterwards, and like after the event was like all over, I like had this moment of like the sun was coming down, and I'm like kind of like tearing up even thinking about it. But it's I just had this moment of like I closed my eyes, and like the sun was like beating on me, and I just remember thinking to myself like I can't believe I have to go back to work on Monday,
Hmm.
because I just like it was so crystal clear that like I had no business in an executive search office, and
Yeah.
like I just worked my ass off. And so it was just I just knew that like that was what I was supposed to be doing. And
Powerful,
so
man.
and I remember like the conversation I had next was like with my mom, and I was like, I can't believe I'm going back to work. And it was in that moment that I was like, I'm making this jump, like I do what I got to do. And so that pushed into high gear. It's like I finally like felt truly connected to it. I had like witnessed the power of it. Had heard from the actual participants and their families. And, then we just started figuring it out, and doing what we had to do to get me in full time.
And and so I want to recap that quickly. Is you know I feel like there's a lot of people who do stay in this like planning, like, oh, I want to start this foundation. I think you highlighted a couple really important points that not everyone is saying necessarily, and one is that you don't need to make something from nothing. There are a ton of foundations that already exist that are doing great work that need people's help, and so you made a proposal to open up a new city, and you got what sounded like a quick yes. But that's just the beginning of the work. Um, and so I think you went from filling out papers in one weekend to hundreds of volunteers, dozens of young people, experiencing the weekend, free food and all these things, and that seems like it's easy enough to gloss over, but that takes what sounds like a ton of work to orchestrate and operate. And so, like, it, without putting words in your mouth, it seems like the biggest lesson here is that, like, it's possible. It's like you can just do it, and it's as simple as saying, like, I'm going to do it now or this weekend. But is that true? Is that what you would say was your lesson in this process? Um, is just do it?
The thing that I would say there is that again, it's that I would I would consider myself lazy like my entire childhood. Like I would self-identify as that, as
Mm,
lazy. It wasn't an option for me. It's just that I had to connect to some sense of purpose, and I found that through service. Because without it, I was incapable of focus. I
yeah.
was incapable of hard work, and you know, all the things that you really want in life and that you're gonna be proud of are on the other end of hard work.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like without that sense of purpose and connectivity to like helping people, I just I couldn't work hard. You
That's
know, I couldn't put in the hours.
that's
And
powerful.
so, yeah.
So I mean, and then I want to go back to your story, but just yesterday I wrote, and I not necessarily even a thought that I thought before, but I wrote down, if you want your life to radically change someone else's life.
Hmm.
And it seems like that's what you did in this weekend and in this process is like
That's
you
great.
changed the lives of these young people, and in like an instant all of a sudden it seems that you're like, I now know that I need to get the hell out of Dodge. Executive search is not for me. I have now seen the light. My life has changed. Very exciting. So you say you leverage this weekend into a full-time opportunity with Dreams for Kids.
Yep, Dreams for Kids DC. So it is a separate. So we started as an offshoot, and then ended up kind of like deviating with the programming of the charter organization. So now they're two separate nonprofit entities, and we have our own kind of federal EIN and operating status.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And I'm sure that's a ton of story there.
yeah.
We don't necessarily need to dive in, but so you're running a nonprofit in DC,
Hmm.
and you realize, I imagine you realize your strengths, and now you start really spending time to leverage your strengths. How does that show up in the world for you? Because I do want to respect your time, and I know that we're getting close to the end, and I want to be able to unpack Tribute and everything
Mm,
that's happened leading up to Tribute.
sure. So how my lessons from Dreams for Kids are kind of showing up today?
Sure. Yeah. As the executive of a nonprofit, I know that you've done a lot of other things
Yeah, yeah.
beyond Dreams for Kids that have positioned you for this CEO role in Tribute, which I think is, uh, as you said at the top of the hour, it's going to be $1 billion business. Like it will be. And there's a difference between being a scrappy 20-something-year-old who runs a 50 student weekend and gets that donated to being the person who can helm the growth of a business to that B mark. And I'm wondering
Yeah.
what's happened in the meantime.
So I would say that the biggest lesson that I've learned there was I think one of the reasons why Dreams for Kids was successful is I learned very quickly to get out of the way and give people a platform to be the best version of themselves and really do their best work. And so there's a talk by Dan Pink called The Science of Motivation,
Hmm.
and just talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And within 2 months of starting my organization, I had a team of 6 interns, four of whom were older than I was, who were working 20 hours a week to help me build these things without getting paid. And it was because we all cared about what we were doing. They all wanted to leverage their unique skill set to do something of value in service of other people. And I think still today, I am not the smartest. I am not the most adept in business, but I've taken time to kind of like hone my skills as a manager of really being able to evaluate people, to be able to identify strategy, vision, brand, and how can you kind of connect really talented people into specific roles and get out of the way and give them an idea of where we're headed so that they can do their best work. And if I can do that, I'll be a successful leader, not because I'm capable of necessarily doing the work myself, but because I can find the best people and put them in the right roles. Is really kind of like what I've learned with Dreams for Kids. So that's I think probably the biggest lesson from Dreams for Kids that is still showing up today, and
Hmm.
like what I really view as my responsibility as a CEO and how to shepherd the organization forward.
That's awesome, and how incredibly concise. And so, in that process, I mean, where have you know, tripped up? And so, I don't necessarily want to spend too much time on the short steps, but I know that my biggest lessons are from proposals that don't hit, or the work I did that underwhelmed has made me better. And I'm wondering what in the process from executive of Dreams for Kids to, I know that you played in freelance capacities or consultant type capacity.
Hmm.
What has kind of stood out as like biggest lessons that has gotten you to about a year ago when we were talking about starting Tribute, or 2 years ago when we were talking about starting Tribute? What has positioned you to be stronger, better, faster today?
Mm, good question.
And I love how thoughtful you're being right now. So there's a lesson here. Is that you don't need to necessarily fill the silence, and I am now. But take time and actually think about that, because I think you're clearly light years ahead of the 21-year-old college student, right?
Yep.
And there are things beyond just spending time in thought or going off to Alaska to like meditate about the process that have happened, that have helped you be action oriented, that have helped you to know what your strengths are, and so that you can leverage them. I think the way that you described being a manager who doesn't need to know how things get done, but needs to paint the picture of where the organization is going and let people use their own mastery, like that's, you could read that in a book, but to be able to breathe it or exude it is totally different, and that comes from time spent not being that type of leader sometimes, or time spent micromanaging or over caring, and so I'm wondering. Oh,
I got my answer.
cool.
I got my answer. Um, the most concise way to do it, because I do want to talk about tribute a little bit as well,
Yeah.
is first things first. Is the simplest way to be a really successful executive, is to understand that you are going to be drowning in a sea of emails and meeting requests and so many things all the time. Like there are going to be so many people that want your time. But at least for us, like we use Asana. I've got a business development whiteboard behind me,
Hmm.
and like every single morning, and especially on Sundays, like what we do is we just take a look at like all the things that we have going on. Like what are the prospects far off? What are the tasks that we have? And you just align those for you and for everyone in the business of what is the most important thing I need to get done to move the business forward. Because what happens is that it becomes so easy for myself, but also for team members to have tasks that need to get done, but oftentimes that are somewhat mindless, and we can continue to be busy and get stuff done that needs to get done, as opposed to working on what's truly most important. And I think that just being able to ask myself that question every single day of like, what is the most important thing to move this business forward? And if I do that every single day, if I do that thing, I find myself being happy. And Abraham Lincoln just has this quote that still rings with me today. And it's like, when I do bad, I feel bad. When I do good, I feel good.
Hmm.
And I know when I have done that thing, and I know when I have not.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do in practice, but it's if you are doing that, I really do believe that that is like the central ethos that will make you successful in business and as a leader, is making sure that everyone's doing the most important thing that day, not just something that needs to get done.
I love that. I personally am spending a lot of time trying to understand in my own world and in my own work what the difference between urgent and important is,
Mm,
and identifying those important tasks and really, um, you know, devoting time, putting it on the calendar, and hitting those things every day. So this interview is part of something I'm building, which is the 20-mile march online community for
yeah.
entrepreneurs. And exactly what you're saying right here is what I'm in the process of working out and helping to clarify is identifying those most important tasks or objectives, and figuring out a way to have them remain front and center every day to help define what where you spend your time and where you allow your energy to flow to.
Yeah.
And so it means a lot that that's also what you're prioritizing in your world and in your business. Um, because I just you're doing things right, and it's good it's good that we're aligned in that way. And so um, I think it's a perfect opportunity to now kind of tell your story. And so you're crushing it by my standards, and you have a beautiful partner who surprises you on a birthday.
I do.
So give us a little bit of that story. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so I am a 29-year-old man today, but 2 years ago on my birthday, I have this really lovely partner named Mickey, who's a pretty prolific entrepreneur in her own right. And I basically walk into our apartment here in Williamsburg and I see like 25 random pairs of shoes in the ground I don't recognize. And then out of nowhere, about 20 of my friends jump out from behind a wall, and it's this massive surprise birthday party that they were throwing for me. And so they come and they give me this big hug, and then Mickey kind of like shouts for everyone to go into our living room. And she had rented this like projector screen, so she puts it up on the wall, and everyone's kind of sitting in our little like living room area, and she hits play. And I realized what she had done is that basically she had sent an email out to 20 of my closest friends and family members behind my back and asked them all to submit a 1 minute video telling me why they love me. So she collected these 20 videos, she compiled them into one montage, and then she surprised me with it. And so I'm sitting there, and one after one, it's my new best friend in New York telling me how much he loves me. It is my dad and my mom as individuals telling me how proud of me they are. It is my brother telling me how great it is to finally be friends again. And like at this point, I just was so overwhelmed with emotion that I just started bawling. I just like didn't want to keep it in. I wanted to honor what these people were saying to me. And so, can you hear that, by the way? The
Yeah,
Slack.
it's
Sorry,
okay.
I can turn that off. I don't want to make sure. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Slack is off. So I sit there and I just like I want to honor them, and um, I just basically like cried for the next 15 minutes. And when I came out of it, I looked at Mickey and I just said, "Wow, that's the best gift I've ever received." And I asked her how she did it, and she looks back at me and she says, "Well, it sucked." And
I can
it
only
was
imagine.
it
I
was
can only
awful. And she
imagine.
said, it took her like 15 hours, and she said had to send hundreds of emails to get people to actually submit their videos. They had to do it through Dropbox Drive, email. She had to actually edit the entire thing together in iMovie, and so it was this long, arduous process. And in that moment, after just experiencing the power myself and realizing how difficult it was to create it, I realized that that's why more people in the world hadn't received this thing. And so that was a light bulb moment right there where, we can build a technology that automates this entire process. And
Mm.
that's exactly what we did with Tribute is we built the best collaborative video editing platform on the web. So now if someone wants to create a tribute for Tony, basically they just drop a line of emails into our system. We automate all the reminders to those people. They can visit a simple web page on a desktop or a mobile device, record a video, answer a simple prompt about why they love Tony. And then we actually built our own video editor, which automatically stitches all those videos together into a beautiful montage that you can give as a gift. And this is really the first step in our evolution.
Mm.
But what we're really doing is kind of harnessing the power of video to help people share these types of meaningful messages. And so the greeting card market is this $8 billion industry that's going away. The e-card market is something that never really caught on, even though people thought that it certainly would. So it's very stagnant. And now you have this new industry that's called video messaging. And so these are the people like Snapchat and a lot of the other guys who are coming up. And it's a $26 billion market. And right now, no one is really kind of providing a platform for these types of curated messages on special occasions, specifically birthdays, weddings, graduations, where the same way with Hallmark is that people need context to express themselves emotionally, and that's why we don't write love letters on a piece of paper. We put it inside of a card, and it has a little saying there, and it's like we feel more comfortable doing that and expressing ourselves in that context. So what we're doing with video and with design is providing people with the context to share those meaningful messages. And the overarching mission is truly to spread gratitude in the world. And it's when we share these messages with the people that we care about, we immediately reaffirm that bond with one another. And also kind of we establish this posture of gratitude and like the general concept of, gratitude makes what we have enough.
Mm.
And, oftentimes we're so much focused on appreciation and procurement as opposed to appreciation. And so by like really like helping people to establish these habits of gratitude and appreciation, we really do believe that we are going to change the world in a really significant way and also build a really healthy business. So that's where we're at the moment.
So I think that's absolutely incredible. And I think there's a couple parts of the tribute process and story that I personally am in love with, um, from just like the way you're positioning and your messaging to where it came from. And I think too. So I'll start with, I love if you have something nice to say it all.
Yeah,
And
man.
I especially love it when you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, and with the
Yeah,
crossouts, that
yeah.
is beautiful. That is such a smart and like aware play that it makes me happy every time I see it.
Well,
Very,
just so
very strong.
everyone's clear on that saying, so like one of the things is I did a TEDx talk at Burning Man last year, and we kind of realized this saying, and that is, we all grow up with this saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, and I point at the audience, and everyone says, don't say it at all. And like as I was looking at that like that phrase online, I realized that if you just replace or you just cross out the don'ts, it becomes, if you have anything nice to say it all, which would be so much more powerful of a statement to
Yeah.
teach our children,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Love it. Absolutely. And so kudos on messaging. Love that. And
Thanks,
then the
bud.
second part, now this is where I'm very interested, is you have an experience that exists. It's not just like a concept like, hey, what if people cared enough to send videos to each other like, yo, we can leverage Snapchat as this like video, and then you start building a tool. It was born of something that actually happened, that someone actually put the time in to execute. And to
Yeah.
me, there's a difference in like hypothetical products that might create a hypothetical good, and products that even if only one person's ever tried to execute this before,
Yeah.
it's someone did, and that we know that we're then leveraging a value, and whether it's now creating a demand for it, or a marketplace that didn't exist, you know that there's someone somewhere that's put the time in to do it the super manual shitty way,
Hmm.
and I think that makes a big deal. So you experience it, and I imagine the way that your brain is wired, you all but instantly say this is a business. What are the
Within
first,
within 60 seconds.
right? So
Yeah.
saw that coming. Now, what are your first steps, knowing that you have this thing, this idea? And I'm of the worldview that ideas are worth nothing. It's how you execute on it. So what are your next steps after experiencing this thing that becomes called a tribute?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really understand from my days with the nonprofits is that, like an idea really doesn't mean anything until you can articulate it in a way that people can understand it and
Hmm.
buy in. And so, the first thing that we started doing is familiar with like the Guy Kawasaki pitch deck, which again, I think is like the industry standard for being able to articulate that your idea is actually a business and a
Hmm.
business that someone could be excited about. And so I go to the drawing board of actually talking about, how we would monetize this, how it would work. Immediately start working on some of the branding to give ourselves like a basic identity and get a holding page up. And then we actually started doing these manually for people. So what we'd say is that we'd actually charge a little bit higher of a price point, but we knew that people wanted to do this. And so what we do is we actually started doing these manually to see if people would pay for, just someone to do this process for them,
Hmm.
basically through Gmail. And they were. And they were paying us a few $100 to do these for them. So we knew that there was a demand for this product. Um, and then, I think one of the easiest ways to kind of like activate a community is really through Kickstarter. And for us, probably a few months after we had actually kind of like started building up the business model, was able to articulate a really strong business case that this deserves to exist and that it really will. So I was able to bring on a technical co-founder, um, about 3 months in who started building the technology. So we had, a basic presence that, wasn't fully cracked out, but something that showed people who we are, what we're about, what we could offer manually. And then in November of that year, we launched a Kickstarter campaign. And at that point, we had already raised a minimal amount of money. So I wasn't full time yet. I would go full time after the Kickstarter campaign. But the reason that the Kickstarter campaign I think was so powerful for us is it's a way to activate your community and educate them about what you're doing. And so the money was really secondary for me in terms of what we wanted to do. Is my goal was to kind of let everyone in my life know what it was that I was working on. And so from there, we were fairly successful with that. So we brought in 35K for an app project, which is somewhat difficult to do on Kickstarter. So I think that we're still like the 15th highest app project in their history. Um, and then from there, we were off to the races.
Mm.
So that was January 2015, and brought on a community manager. Technology went live to the world, started building these. And then from beta period, it was a very real thing where for the past year, we've been focused on building the best piece of technology possible and actually responding to, comprehensive qualitative feedback from our users about
Yeah.
what it is that they want this to be. And because I've experienced it personally, and it again is a very tangible experience and product that we're delivering, we really understand what this needs to be, the perfect product. And so that's been the mission that we're on, and then continue to raise a little bit more money and expand the vision. And now we're getting ready to move beyond collaborative video editing to these individual video cards, and a lot of other cool stuff has happened in between.
Awesome. And so in this conversation, you have a couple more minutes to fill in
Yeah,
some
yeah,
blanks.
sure. Yeah,
Um, and so I've seen the guts. I've been on the website. I've started my own little tribute page. Beautiful. You've made something that today I'd say is already beautiful, and I can't imagine the potential and where you see it going because it's great already. Um, I think personally, I would love to hear a little bit about your experience in searching for a technical co-founder. I am not technical. I think that a lot of people would identify as like not technical, and I'm
sure.
wondering how they talk about like co-founder dating. How did you find the yin to your yang?
Yeah, I was somewhat lucky here in terms of like how I met mine, but the reality is that I think if you have a good business, you're going to be able to find a technical co-founder. You just have to spend time like actually in areas where they exist.
Hmm.
And so, if you're telling yourself that you're going to have difficulty finding a technical co-founder and you haven't spent any time at hackathons or at like tech conferences, then you just haven't tried.
Mm.
And so, going into it with Tribute early on, we knew it was a business. It's like we had experienced this. People were paying for this manually, so I could prove a pretty kind of compelling point that this was a cool business that actually had an impact in people's lives. So we had that going for us. And I actually just randomly ran into this guy who was working out in the gym of our office building, and started talking about the software that he was building in college to detect landmines in Iraq. And I was like, "Wait, you're doing that in college?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "What are you doing now?" He's like, "I don't know, thinking about starting another business." And I was like, "Well, let me tell you about Tribute."
Yeah, I built out this Guy Kawasaki 10 pager. Um, so from very beginning, when you say raise a small amount, you don't need to disclose anything that feels uncomfortable. Don't do it. Um, but raise a small amount of money. How do you do that? So pre Kickstarter, you found some money, and that is friends, family. That's you Google searched angel investors in New York City. What's the process to get money for an idea?
Yeah, I think that, we certainly started like most people do with some friends and family, so give us a little bit of breathing room while we're there. Fortunately, I had built up a lot of relationships through my nonprofit activities, so kind of like high net worth individuals and people do, I think just kind of like had a solid relationship with me and like in this entrepreneurial startup community. So that was certainly helpful. The Kickstarter was another thing that was there. Again, I think that creating an investor deck that really was like beautiful, that told a story. We were able to show investors early on. I think one of the biggest switches for us is that we just showed people, okay, here's how people are currently using this thing that we built. But more kind of like interestingly is that people want to see the reality of investment and I was listening to this Chris Sacca interview recently, and he was basically talking about how you need to make sure that like your expectations for your business, that your investors' expectations are basically in line.
Mm,
And the reality is that like when you're talking to investors, is like they want to see a hit, like so for so many people that are starting off, they're just talking about, oh wow, if my business is worth like, $2, $3 million down the year, like down the line, that's gonna be really exciting. And like we'll have like a great small team. But the reality is like they just don't understand that that's not compelling for investors. Is that,
yeah.
people who are coming and investing in your businesses, they just need to see like, 10x growth every single year. And I knew that that was the kind of business that we wanted to build and that it could be. And so the biggest thing for us was showing people that there was a shift in this industry, is that the greeting card industry is going away, e-cards never worked, video messaging is blowing up, and
Mm,
showing them that in 5 to 10 years, video cards, video messages are going to overtake this entire industry, and there's a massive opportunity on the gifting side. And I would ask investors, I was like, do you believe that this is going to exist? And then basically what investors would say is like, yeah, I haven't had one that disagrees with me. It's like,
yeah.
so what we could show is that this business that we're building, like the idea of this
Yeah.
will exist in 5 to 10 years. So you're not guessing on whether or not this will be a business. What you're betting on is that we are the team to do it.
Right.
And so then I think for investors, it was really a compelling opportunity where you gave them the kind of like that faux assurance that
Yeah.
this was a thing that's going to exist, and just kind of now you can break down why we're the best team. Um, so that was kind of like how I went about things, and I think just again, I was fortunate to have my girlfriend Mickey, who's involved with the business, and just again, she's so good at kind of building buzz around things,
Oh yeah.
and something where like I'm more empathetic when I'm communicating with people and when I'm doing business development. Let me get you talking about yourself, and I'll help you solve a problem. Whereas Mickey is much more like adamant, like in her beliefs, and she'll come to the table and she'll just say, "This is going to be a $1 billion business in 3 years," and like she's not nice about it. She's just like the big switch, and I really do believe this is like if someone's going to give you money, one thing I can guarantee you, no one is going to give you money because you're nice.
Right.
And that's something that people don't necessarily understand, but for so many people, and especially for me, that I really understand, is fuck being nice, because no one will ever give you money. No one will partner with you because you are nice. People will partner with you because you have an aura of inevitability. Is because
Ooh.
you walk into a room and you know that this fucking thing is going to exist in 5 years, and this is your opportunity to join me. And that's really the mentality of like, if I don't, like, if you're, I'm inviting you to join me, and like my messaging and my language with people is just that. And
Hmm.
it's like we need a decision by this date, and we need to do that. And that like just really like fuck being nice. It's like
Yeah.
when you walk into those rooms, even though it may feel unnatural, that's what people want out of the leaders of these types of organizations.
Yeah.
And so you can be courteous and be kind, but it's again, you have to be self-assured, and you have to believe in it and do the work, not walking in and just saying this is going to be successful for no reason,
Yeah.
but it's actually being self-assured because I've been able to write down on paper, here's what we're doing to get to X in 4 years, and that makes sense, and we're going to make it happen.
I
Uh,
I love that. I think that there's so much there, and I want to take a couple more minutes to think that through. So I've one Chris Sacca has come up now a number of times in interviews, and so he's a beast. But there's something that I heard recently, and I think that you're doing this, which is fantastic, and it's you want to create an agreement in a negotiation, right? And the agreement ideally or normally should be market size and possibility of value tied to the market size. And so it was modeled to me when talking about how can Instagram be a $1 billion business that's never created revenue, right? And they're saying that in the negotiation, no one really knows what happened, but in the negotiation, if the team at Instagram says, let's talk about Facebook, let's talk about how many users you have, and it's hundreds of millions. And
yeah,
he said, if you can assume that we can create $1 of revenue per known audience. We turn Facebook audience into Instagrammers or Instagrammers into Facebook. If we can agree that there's $1 worth of value to be found, um, would you say yes to that? And they're like yes. And then, well, we have 200 million users. You have 600 million users. we're at least $800 million of value, no question. And then if you want to switch things on, you want to talk about, how we're going to leverage it. You can. All those things are conversations that happen in a secondary level.
Yeah.
But to begin, and I think this is what you're saying you've done and positioned, is you've said greeting cards represent this size. There are this many Americans. There are this many people in these spaces. If we can agree that there's $1 of value per person to
Yeah.
be found in the marketplace, how big is the market?
Mm.
And they're saying billions, and you said you want to be a part of the team that gets there, which reminds me of a Simon Sinek. I got to hear him speak a couple years back, and he talked about, in the simplest form, a leader is someone who, as the plane, let's say, is crashing in like a Lost type scenario, the
Hmm.
plane is crashing, a leader sees smoke on the far side of the island. A There's two ways things can go. Person one says, okay, people that have survived, I think we should probably start camp here. Let's take a vote. Who thinks that camp is the best thing? Who thinks that trying to find food is the best thing? Who wants to survey the land, right? Person A. Person B says, I saw smoke on the far end of this island as we were coming down. I know it with certainty. I know that we can get there probably by the end of the day. If we left right now, I'm going. Who's coming? And it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing. It's like,
Yeah.
listen, it's not a question for me if this industry exists.
Yeah.
It's not a question for me if I have the stuff. It's not a question for me if I can build the team. It's happening. Are you coming with me?
Yeah.
And that's really compelling. You guys are going to be $1 billion business, man. Like, I'm sold. I'm in. How do I, I'm sending tribute. So
We'll
we're
send you a term sheet.
exactly. We're gonna let's wrap this. But what I'll say is, um, somehow or another, my community is going to get tied into tribute. We can talk about that off the call. But if people want to find you, if they want to see you online, I'm not Tim Ferriss. You're not going to get millions of requests. But what could people reach out to you and ask questions on, or how do they find you and connect?
Totally. So we're going to do a small giveaway with Tony's community for some free tribute. So we'll send an email about that. But to catch up with the tribute team, we're at tribute.co and on Twitter and Instagram at WeTribute. And then my personal stuff is all at It's Andrew Horn. And so if you ever kind of want to check out any of the speaking stuff that I'm up to, that's all at itsandrewhorn.com.
On a personal branding note, I think that left to right, you're entirely Andrew Horn, and I've loved that since day one. Very, very strong positioning, sir. I think
Thanks,
very
brother.
cool. And so I'm excited to see We Tribute grow. I think that our experiences together leave me beyond confident about the B mark. You say 3 years. Let's see if it happens faster. Excited to be here at the earlier stages. So thank you, sir, for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Cheers, brother. That was a great interview, man. You've got many, many great things ahead. So I appreciate the time and look forward to connecting with everybody.
Awesome. All right. So